Tardes, siendo hoy viernes, después de ese almuerzo, esperamos que podamos mantener las mentes activas. No sé si notaron que nos pusieron una musiquita antes de empezar. Ahora nos toca una sesión que va a estar enfocada en la presentación de los esfuerzos relativos al portal judicial que está impulsando el Instituto Judicial Mundial del Medio Ambiente con apoyo de todos los socios y principalmente de ONU Medio Ambiente, representado hoy por Arnold, y tendremos una sesión que presidirá el ministro Benjamín y en el cual participará Eva Duer virtual, con un material virtual que nos ha enviado. Entonces con eso voy a dar la palabra al ministro Benjamín para que inicie esta sesión de nuestro programa.
Buenas tardes a todos. Yo quería decir que voy a hablar inglés para facilitar tal vez. So I will speak in English to make the life of the interpreters perhaps easier. This is a panel that involves the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, and I will say a word about the Institute, and also UN Environment that is hosting the Secretariat of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment. And so Arnold, could you come to and join me? I'm trying to get Claudia. Can you give me the program? So, not yet. This is supposed to be the big surprise, and even before I announce it. So this is a panel which is in fact more of a conversation just to update you on the developments of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment. And I would like to recognize that we have in this room members of the governing committee of the Institute. Let me mention Justice Wilson, who is sitting there, Justice Michelle Weeks, that is sitting here, Justice Emmanuel, that is also sitting on, and then we have, Justice Nowhere. Those are 4 colleagues of the 14 member of the governing committee of the Institute. The other members are Justice Lorenzetti, that spoke by video, I believe yesterday, representing South America. We have Justice Luc Lavrissen from the Constitutional Court of Belgium. Justice Lavrissen is the chair of the European Union Forum of Judges for the Environment, and here with us we have the vice president of the forum. For Asia, we have as members Justice Kumar from the Supreme Court of India and president of the Green Tribunal of India. Justice Kumar he has retired very recently and will be substituted by another colleague from India. Justice Mansoor from Pakistan, from the Supreme Court of Pakistan, Justice Sunamatra from the Supreme Court of Indonesia, and Justice Brian Preston from Australia, from the Environmental Court of New South Wales. Did I miss? No, I think those are the ones, and we are waiting for the Supreme People's Court of China to nominate the representative of that country, of that region, in fact, to our committee. And we are still working on the representative of West Africa, since we would like, it was a decision of the committee to have, if possible, a woman francophone from that region. And it has not been easy to identify that person, someone with a strong interest in environmental law. In March, the Institute signed an agreement with UN Environment, with Eric Solheim, the Executive Secretary, Executive Director of UN Environment, and Arnold Krajhuber, who is sitting next to me. So the Secretariat will be based in Nairobi, and in the next 2-3 months, we are going to have the Secretariat in operation. And the registration is taking much longer than we thought, but the paperwork has already been submitted in Geneva. The Institute will be an international organization incorporated under Swiss law. So in a nutshell, that's what I would like to tell you in terms of the organization of the Institute. This year has been a very active period in terms of activities of the Institute. We had the World Water Forum. Several of you were there. Was it the eighth World Water Forum, the largest event on water in the world? It happens every 3 years. And this was the very first time that it was organized in the Southern Hemisphere, and happened to be in Brazil. And that's why this morning we had a whole panel, as Arnold said, a journey, quite interesting journey on the Brazilian Declaration of Judges on water justice. We also had very recently a major event that Justice Manuel mentioned earlier today in Maputo, with almost 40 Chief Justices and deans or directors of judicial schools from all over Africa. So for us, this is something quite remarkable because we now see environmental law not restricted to parts of the world and parts of the judiciary of the world, but it's pretty much a global endeavor. And in October, Claudia, please correct me, in Lima, we are going to have a training program for Latin American judges in back-to-back with a conference of the Organization of American States. And Claudia is organizing that event. It's really a course. It's not a conference. I will ask Arnold to say a few words on behalf of UN Environment, but before I do it, there are two products that we would like to present today. One is the prototype that by November, we hope will be not a prototype anymore, but will be fully functioning of the Judicial Portal of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment. And again, instead of inventing the wheel, we decided to walk hand in hand with UN Environment, considering the fact that UN Environment already has a fantastic group of people around a project that is fully, it's in full operation, called Informia, based in Geneva. So that's the first product that we are going to show. Our colleague Eva Dua from the head of Informia was not able to be here this time, but she has a presentation on that, and Arnold will help with that as well. So we could not really say that the Institute was functioning without a judicial portal, and you're going to see it's a sophisticated judicial portal. It's taken a lot of work and energy, not just from us, but especially from UN Environment, and we are very grateful. Arnold, please convey to Elizabeth Mirema and to Eric Zollheim our gratitude. And the second product is one that interests us, but also the environmental law scholars, and the ones that are here, and others that are not here, because we decided in conjunction with the World Commission on Environmental Law to have a whole series of what we are calling environmental law video series. We're going to see that it's professional, it's not amateur, and we want to give to the world in different language the very best of environmental law. And it's something that someone can click anywhere, and then you have a talk on different aspects of environmental law. We have already recorded, Professor Antolini, yeah, we have already 16. We have already recorded 16 lectures. It's a potpourri of topics. And we are beginning a second phase with courses. So we invited Professor David Hunter to be the first to tape 8 hours on a course. Of course, unfortunately, everything has to be video recorded in Brasilia, and you are going to see why, because it's, you know, we have a design for that, and it's only there, which was made exactly for this video series and donated to us by the Catholic University of Brasilia. So we are beginning this second phase, in which we are going to have full courses, let's say on environment impact assessment, on international environmental law, climate change law, Professor Michael Gerard. So, and in different language. We don't have the resources to do the translation, so it has to be different professors from, and of course it's even better because we include more people, more scholars in that. Before I ask Arnold to say a few words, I would like to thank 3 people in special. There are many people to thank, but 3 that are here, and I would like to benefit from the fact that they are here. Well, first, our mentor of the World Commission on Environmental Law, Professor Nicholas Robinson. Because all this began all the way back when Nick was chair of the World Commission on Environmental Law and working with judges. The only thing I can claim is that I proposed the idea of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, but that didn't come out of the blue. The work with judges was already being done by WCL and by members of IUCN, like the Environmental Law Institute. Jay Pendergrass was just reminding me that we met at the very beginning of this journey of ELI in 1990. Right? So it's a long time on working with judges. So Nick, again, many thanks to you. It's you see that your work comes to fruition with more work. So that's the task. And then our colleague, Minister Sheila Abed, who is sitting there, also former chair of WCL. The first time I suggested the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment was when she was still chair. And it was Sheila that gave the financial resources, provided the financial resources for the development of this initiative. So those two people. And the other one is Professor Denise Antolini, who is responsible for many, many things, but especially is the one behind the video library, the Environmental Law Video Library. And it's a huge amount of work, of energy, dedication, and I would like to thank you for this. And finally, in addition to people, I have to thank the partners. There is nothing that we do without UN Environment. We are always together, and with the Organization of American States. And in addition to this, we benefit from the generosity, the knowledge, the experience of institutions that have worked with environmental law globally and with judges like the Environmental Law Institute. So Jay Pendergrass and Scott Fulton, many thanks, and Claudia De Wind, since you represent UN Environment, and Arnold, I'm sorry, OAS and Arnold UN Environment. With that, I will ask Arnold to say a few words, and then we are going to see a very short, how do you call it in English? A video clip. It's not the full video of the first video that we have already put on the WCL web page. Is a video by Professor Michel Prier, the pioneer of environmental law in France, and we wanted to make sure that in this first phase we recognize the pioneers of environmental law. There are several other talks that we want to record. It's still in this first page. Arnold.
I'll talk about a review of the progress of national environmental law all over the world. It has been a terrific development of national environmental law since about 50 years, under the influence, very strong of international environmental law. But the question now is to know if we are able to evaluate this progress and to see what are the main issues of the development of national environmental law. And that's why we'll try to start about the output coming from the Rio Declaration. And mainly in the Rio Declaration, there is the Principle 11, which is very precise about
So, just an anecdote on this first video. As you know, it's Professor Michel Prier, and we wanted to start with the Francophone, because the Francophone complain a lot that most of the work we do is in English. And those that know Professor Prier knows that he doesn't speak English. And he requests an interpreter when he's in conference, sometimes creating a little problem because the interpreter is not there. And I told him that we wanted to have him, as the representative of La Francophonie. And to my surprise, when I saw the video was in English. So now I'm arranging with him, another recording, an introduction to French environmental law in French. He speaks perfect English, as you saw. So this is a product that we are very proud of because of its usefulness. It's something that will stay there, and we achieve many goals. One, we deliver something that will be, as I said, useful to judges and to practitioners. Second, through this, that is available globally, without putting pressure on people, we are in fact harmonizing environmental law globally. It's a very nice way of influencing the whole world in a good manner. We are not imposing anything. We are just showing what the state of the art is in different parts of the world. And third, we are also recognizing the very best among us, because in many parts of the world, we have wonderful scholars, very dedicated, brilliant judges, not just in what they do, but also in exposing ideas. And we democratize this knowledge globally. So I'm particularly I'm thrilled with the results. And as I said, we already have 16 videos recorded in different language. And Denise, many thanks again. Now, Arnold.
Let's see if the music doesn't come back on, before I start talking. Antonio, while you were talking, I think it brought me to the realization that we've come a long way. And I think that's a tribute to Professor Robinson's vision, also to Sheila Abed's, putting it into motion, and to your and Denise's perseverance in making sure that we get somewhere. Most of you in the room know Justice Benjamin, but those who do not, it's very difficult to say no to him. And so we are from UN Environment. We could not say no in terms of supporting this Global Judicial Institute on the environment. For one, it relates to a very proud legacy that we have within UN Environment with regards to supporting the work of the judiciary in the field of the environment. You've already heard through some of the presentation that interaction dates back to the year 2002 and has really picked up at Rio Plus 20 with the adoption of a declaration on justice, governance, and law for environmental sustainability, which is the precursor to the concept of environmental rule of law, which was then coined by member states in an internationally negotiated document for the first time in 2013 at UN Environment's first universal gathering of its governing body. And second of all, what's unique about the Institute is that it is an institute by judges for judges. So we play a very small role, but that small role we are proud to play. And we hope through the initiative that we will see now, or the infant stages of that initiative that we will see now, we can help you judges to share your information around the world more effectively, that we can perhaps create tools and resources together that you feel are useful. We are in the year 2018, and we cannot do things the way we did them 50 years ago. It's very difficult to provide capacity building around the world in person. Meetings like this one here cost a lot of money. And you know, we've done a lot through this wonderful partnership, Antonio, that you've also outlined with partners like the Organization of American States, with ELI, and we continue to do that, of course. But I think we need to look for innovative ways to get the information out there so that we can reach as many judges as possible as we go forward. But I think the Institute is on a good path. And indeed, we have signed this agreement with our executive director. We have also prepared follow-up agreements, a draft memorandum of understanding, which will further concretize what UN Environment can do in terms of supporting judges on this path. It's not always easy for us because many governments get a little bit nervous when they hear that we work directly with the judiciary. But I think the fact that we can, and that's increasingly, you know, as I said, a well-recognized success story, is also a tribute to the role that judges play in the national context. They often are very, very powerful, and they can help us get to the results that we all envisage. So with that, I think, Antonio, shall we start the video?
Yes, but before we start the video, let me ask Claudia if she would like to say something. I'm sure you want.
Okay, got it. Sorry, I'm technologically impaired, but as Arnold very well said, we need to find new ways, explore new frontiers. And I just want to say that at the OAS, we're extremely grateful for the partnership that we've been able to establish. So on behalf of the member states, I actually thank all of you. I think that pulling our resources together in these times is exactly what we need to be able to have an impact. And we look forward to making sure that those lectures get as far as possible and get the most reach that we can in all of the languages that we can, and also to work with all of you to build this portal and have a very strong contribution from the region to make sure that the work of our judges in trying to help and safeguard our environmental patrimony is shared. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Claudia. Emmanuel? So I'll ask the three colleagues from the governing committee to say a few words. Emmanuel?
Sorry, you took me by surprise because I wasn't part of this.
I noticed you were dozing off.
Yes. I think before I say anything, only to also add that in the governing committee, we also have Lord Robert Cornworth, who you forgot to...
Yes, I forgot Lord Cornwall.
Yeah, from the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, yeah.
But since I know that he is not usually connected and watching live webcast,
Yes.
I'm sure if nobody tells him that I forgot, he
Yes.
won't know.
Yes. Just in case he's watching, but yes. Just to commend the work that is being done by all of you, by the organizers who helped put together this program and many other programs. And really hope that we move the momentum. I can't remember who said it earlier that I think it's Lovejoy, Professor Lovejoy, who said that there's no other option apart from being optimistic in what we do. So I really hope that we don't lose our optimism in what we do and continue from where we are in our different capacities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think we lack optimism in our environmental and judge family. That we have plenty. Thank you. Justice Weeks.
I endorse I endorse the, all of the remarks by both of the co-chairs and Emmanuel, and I am optimistic about the future, judicial portal in particular, because I am 100% certain that it will contribute to the education of judges worldwide. And just to commend all of the organizers for putting together the various symposium and also the various trainings that have been implemented worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Justice Noer.
Every beginning is difficult, and this organization is in its early beginning, although there are many years since Nick Robinson proposed the idea. He wanted an organization for judges, among judges. And we have not too many resources, we have not too many people, but still I think, although we are young and with these limitations, we have achieved quite something. And I'm optimistic, and I hope that we will do valuable work in the future in the spirit of those of you who had this idea in the beginning. I think it's a very important work that we can do and that I hope that we will do.
Thank you very much. Justice Wilson.
Thank you, Justice Benjamin, and I'd also like to thank Claudia and Denise, because I know how hard they've been working and have been from afar watching the communication that is so powerful that has led to this event. And also, since Nick and Sheila are both here, thank you very much, because this is historic for our country. Reinhold makes a very good point that we may have some limited resources, but the impact of what the Global Judicial Institute has done so far in association with the Organization of American States, and thank you very much, Jay, and also Scott, you know, the ELI team has coordinated what is very likely to be the very first time in the United States where you have judges coming together to talk about environmental law. And certainly this is a point in time, given all that's been discussed here about the pressing environmental issues in this country and elsewhere, this is a really important event. And for us to have colleagues as well from the Environmental Protection Agency, we've had some great judges here, is an enormous step for the United States. So I thank the organizers and look forward to changing the world with the other members of our Global Judicial Institute. Thanks.
Thank you. That's what I call optimism. Okay, so now let's move to the second product, which is the Judicial Portal. We have had a number of meetings on this portal, face-to-face meetings, conference calls, people in different time zones, opposite time zones. It's not easy, but the product is coming together nicely. The last meeting was in Vienna in July, and I would like to thank Justice Noe and Justice Wilson, but also Justice Brian Preston and Judge Clément from France, who he attended in person and is one of the experts that we have among judges on those complicated things of technology. So it's a great group of people, and of course Eva Duer, that you're going to see her in a minute. She is just wonderful, and especially because Elizabeth Mirema and Arnold gave her all the freedom to really pursue this project as she saw it fit. There is a team of web designers working on this. So Eva is Eva Duer. She is an environmental law expert that works for UN Environment and heads Infomia. But it's one of those great minds that can combine law and technology. But the real work is done by web designers, the same ones that have done the Infomia website and information. So we can have the second video.
In this video, I'm going to show you the main features of the portal, which is jurisprudence, judicial network, and then the e-learning tool. There is a login to a secured space, and apart from the links to these three main elements, you will also find latest news and events, uploaded jurisprudence, and links to online courses for judges and prosecutors, as well as the final link to join the judicial network. Let's start with jurisprudence, accessible from this button and the navigation. The list includes court cases on the left side and the possibility to filter the list on the right side. Filters allow for searching by topics, glossary terms, country, and more. On the case page, on the left side, you will find the details, and on the right side, the related e-learning courses and glossary terms. The judicial network is next. The forum platform for judges communication. Find all discussion here and the possibility to filter them or search through the discussions. In this section, members can also upload jurisprudence and start new discussions. Members can search other members and access their details, including the open discussions or uploaded jurisprudence. Another important feature of the networking section is the private messaging section that allows members to engage in private communication. From here, let's move to the e-learning section. On this page, there is a possibility to take foundational courses on international environmental law and advanced courses that are organized by 9 categories and related glossary terms as well, which will lead us to the glossary page, which is also accessible from the navigation, where you can search a term, download all terms, or filter them. Click on a term to see its definition and related jurisprudence to the e-learning. To recap the main elements of what I have just shown you, we will not go into it in detail, but just to reiterate that the idea is that the first phase will focus on case law on the e-learning, which is already partly available, and the second phase will then allow for an iterative development of the judicial network. We have just seen the homepage, and this slide again details out the elements that are available in addition to the 3 main sections, which are jurisprudence, e-learning, and networking. On jurisprudence, we have the case listings on the left and the filters on the right. On the case page, the full details on the left and e-learning and glossary terms on the right. And then the e-learning with the foundational and advanced courses and the glossary terms. And the glossary, again, will allow for the visibility of the definitions. And the judicial network we have touched upon for the next phase. What is here important for me to show you is that you can already access the prototype of the Judicial Portal yourself. We hope that this will help you to facilitate not only the discussion, but also to provide your personal feedback in the coming weeks. Already, we thank you for your attention, and I wish you fruitful discussions during these sessions, and we look very much forward to collaborating on this important judicial portal under the guidance of the Global Judicial Institute. Thank you very much.
So a couple of comments, and then I will open up for suggestions. Do we have time, Denise, for questions, suggestions? The portal, our hope is that it will be, the first phase will be operational in January, although it will be ready in November. But we will still use November, December for minor adjustment. As you know, in a portal, the most difficult task is not to design the portal, it's to feed the portal. And that's the main beauty of this exercise, because we are aligning ourselves with Ecolex, which is the largest data bank of environmental law resources in the world. It's a joint initiative of UN Environment, FAO, and IUCN. So we are going to get all the information on legislation, jurisprudence that is already there, and it will move entirely to the Judicial Portal. Second, we are going to inherit it. The whole data bank of Informia on international environmental law. All MEAs, all cases, and we are talking about hundreds of cases, and the structure that comes with that information, because the information has to be shown in a systematic manner. And finally, we are going to, this is a long-term process. The portal will be improved as it's used by the judges. The second phase that was mentioned by Eva is the one that requires that the Secretariat be fully functioning. And that's why we are calling it the second phase, because it will be the platform for the communication among judges on environmental law in a secure manner around the world. But for that, we need to have the Secretariat in place to feed the system with the membership and keep it updated. So someone this morning mentioned, well, in fact, was the Chief Justice of Vermont. I was sitting next to him, and he said, I am so surprised that what has been shown here, we have all those problems. Perhaps not the solutions. So that's exactly the importance of the portal, because the portal will benefit from the fact that problems are very similar, the solutions might be a little bit different, and judges will then communicate. So from the Supreme Court of Chile and then the Supreme Court of Indonesia, they are facing the same problem, and the judges can communicate in a secure manner, judges with judges. So I now will open up for questions, for suggestions, but a final word on the work of Eva Duer. She is so dedicated that she interrupted her vacation in Austria with her family. She has 2 or 3 kids. In order to have a one-day meeting on the portal, face-to-face with some of the members of the Institute, so the prototype would be ready for this meeting here. So this shows the level of dedication of people, colleagues, partners, and UN Environment in that regard. Okay, on that note, we are open. Any question, any suggestion? Yes, Claudia De Wind.
There's another video with Eva actually giving remarks that was just on the screen that we haven't seen.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So there is another video.
Can we put Eva's remarks?
It is my pleasure to present to you today the prototype of the Judicial Portal on the Environment. I'm Eva Duer. I work as a lawyer on knowledge management issues in the Law Division of UN Environment. I regret I cannot present this in person to you today, and I would like to thank my colleague Arnold for his help and support in getting this to you, and I hope that technology is not failing us. Let me also thank the chair, Justice Antonio Herman Benjamin, and for his visionary support in getting this portal to life, and all the justices who continue to be involved in this process. Let me quickly recap the main steps that brought us here today. Since the first time that the idea was presented of associating the Judicial Portal to the Infirmare infrastructure at the Interim Governing Committee meeting of the Global Judicial Institute in March in Brazil. When the idea was endorsed back then, a number of volunteer justices met at IUCN headquarters in Gland in April to consider the initial main elements and the wireframes. These judges also represented the Global Judicial Institute and carried the torch to the Infirmare Steering Committee meeting in June this year in Switzerland. This meeting endorsed the idea of associating the Judicial Portal to the Infirmare infrastructure and welcomed the Global Judicial Institute as a partner to the initiative. Therefore, in July, the justices reconvened in Vienna to discuss the concrete services and desired features in more detail with a web designer that works with us. A time plan and a governance process were considered, and today's presentation of the prototype is one step in this process. Over the coming weeks and even in this session, we hope to receive your initial feedback and thoughts on the improvement of the prototype, which would then allow us to finalize the process towards the implementation of the portal in a phased approach, first focusing on the case law collection and the e-learning, and in a second phase on the networking aspect of the portal. With this introduction, I would like to go to the presentation of the prototype, for which purpose I would switch off the video. I would like to thank you for your attention and all the best for this session. Thank you very much.
Well, the good news is that I was reminded that there was the second video, because I was complaining to another. I said, hey, no, we can only hear the voice of Eva, but where is Eva? The bad news is that, as opposed to Lord Carnwath, that I'm sure is not connected and watching us now, I have no doubt that Eva Dua, whatever she is fully connected. So our apologies for, in fact, reversing the order of the videos, but everybody love it, so don't worry. Okay, with that, let's get some comments, please. If not, then yes. Alejandra, let me pay a tribute to you on something else that we, you see the beauty of working in a collective manner. We were having breakfast in Santiago, Scott Fulton, me, and Alejandra. And we were discussing the program of the World Water Forum that would be this was last year, that would be this year. And Alejandra said, what about if we do an ELI reporter, right? Is that the Jay? Is that the environmental law reporter, special issue on water, just with articles from the judges? So it was Alejandra's idea, and I would like to recognize this in public.
Gracias, Antonio. Y bueno, muchas felicidades por este esfuerzo que en Brasilia vimos en In Progress, y ahora pues parece una herramienta muy impresionante. Mi pregunta en particular es un instrumento de jueces para jueces. Pero quería preguntar, por ejemplo, el Environmental Law Institute, tenemos proyectos en los que podemos crear materiales o trabajar con jueces. Ahora estamos trabajando, tenemos un proyecto y financiamiento para trabajar en Colombia y en Ecuador, donde nos queremos coordinar totalmente con Claudia y con la OEA para asegurarnos de que sus materiales y los que se desarrollen vayan de la mano. Pero acabamos de terminar, por ejemplo, un proyecto en Indonesia, donde la OEA no trabaja, y me pregunto si, ya que estamos creando, invirtiendo recursos que conseguimos en crear materiales, desarrollar sesiones, ¿habría alguna forma en la que organizaciones externas al instituto podamos contribuir los materiales que generamos para poder tal vez estar a disposición en el portal y que lleguen a un mayor número de jueces, o incluso si desde antes podríamos diseñar con el instituto el enfoque, los materiales, etcétera, para asegurarnos de que, además de los proyectos a los que debemos destinarlos, de donde viene el financiamiento para el Environmental Law Institute, puedan ser puestos a disposición de esta herramienta?
Well, I will ask the other colleagues to reply as well. One of the needs that we realized in the work that we have been doing since we began designing the portal is that we are going to need a committee to run, to manage of judges. Not to work on the portal itself, but to take important decisions. Like, for example, should we incorporate the materials that come from this organization or from that organization? Because of course, from ELI, we know that it will be good quality, it will be unbiased, no second thoughts or interest behind those products, but it's not always the case. And we know of papers and studies that are not totally impartial and have are funded by vested interests that would like to have their message conveyed to judges. So in order to insulate and to protect the independence, in this case, not the independence of judges, but the independence of knowledge that is provided by judges to judges, we really need to have a committee. And that's one of the decisions that we are going to take in the next meeting of the governing committee. I don't know if my other colleagues would like to add anything on this. But definitely we need knowledge that is generated by academia, by judicial schools, by scientific organizations. We judges cannot generate this, with very few exceptions, we cannot generate this huge amount of knowledge. And definitely we will need the knowledge generated by the international and regional organizations. Material that is extraordinary, and often the judges don't have access, even if the material has been translated into the national language. So all this was mentioned to Eva in the e-library that will be there with important scientific documents that are published by organizations that have great credibility. Yeah, Professor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you for your kind remarks. But I think we should go back a little bit and thank all the judges since the mid-1990s and those at UNEP since then too. In the initial Judicial Symposium, which was held for judges in South Asia, in Colombo, Sri Lanka, in 1996, the very first of these international organizational meetings that UNEP convened. UNEP reached out to a number of us. I was there from IUCN. But it was clear that throughout South Asia, the judges of the different nations, despite their many disagreements on public policy questions or politics, were cooperating together and sharing a judicial tradition. So the rulings of the Supreme Court of India influenced the rulings in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and even in the directed judiciary then of Colombo, there was a sharing of jurisprudence. And that really was the spark that then said, this is not just a South Asian phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. And every year since, there were meetings and symposia that led up to the 2002 Judicial Supreme Court and High Court Chief Justices session that UNEP convened in Johannesburg on the eve of the World Summit on Sustainable Development. The lesson that came out of that meeting and its aftermath was that there are lots of people who want to organize judges from outside the courts. And there are lots of people, including foreign ministries, that are not quite comfortable with judges being independent of the foreign ministries. But those of us who saw and study the courts from academia and from within courts realized that we needed a place which was going to be a safe place for judges to collaborate together, just as they do within their own courtrooms, just as they do within their own national or regional court systems. No one tells them what to talk about. They talk about what's necessary for the judicial practice. And so it is from that the germ of this idea began to take hold. And it really was an extraordinary thing, and I think serendipity, that the chairman of the World Commission on Environmental Law would turn out to be a judge. When I first met Antonio, we were just lowly people in the world trying to make environmental law work. Yeah. So if I can see anything that comes from this last 20 or 30 years of judicial cooperation, it is that the courts have the capacity to work together, but they don't have resources to work outside their own jurisdictions. The courts are understaffed and under-resourced for international cooperation. And one of the great challenges of the Judicial Institute will be the capacity building for courts to work across the world on questions of the world, of the earth. And that is what's happened. So I want to really pay tribute to the sustained work of the UN Environment now, then UNEP, the sustained work of IUCN, the extraordinary work that the Organization of American States has undertaken, the work the Asian Development Bank has undertaken with the Asian Forum of Judges, and this network of partner institutions is what's making the optimism I have for the Judicial Institute realistic. This is not just a wild idea. This idea has been gestating for a long time. It has deep roots. We've tested those roots. If I had only one thing to pass on to this body to reflect on and to the governing board of the Institute, is that not everyone will see it the way you do or the way I've just described it. And it may be necessary to create kind of a special judicial committee which will be the interface between the Institute and those who disagree with the Institute. There will be those who demand access to your information and want the Judicial Portal to be opened up to everyone, who will want access to your off-the-record or private dialogues. Some may even wish to access them on their own. And I think, therefore, some kind of a committee or board that deals with judicial ethics and the integrity of an independent judiciary and the integrity of your portal will doubtless be needed in the future to answer the complaints that people bring, that will be sort of independent enough to look into things and then vouch for your correct behavior, because it won't be self-evident to those who are not so interested in the results of the judiciary. But I congratulate you all. It's great to be obsolete. I'm happy to retire from it.
Thank you, Nick. I am instructed now, and as a judge, I love when I get instructions. And I don't have to give orders. I get orders. So here I'm getting orders that now we need to wrap up and move to the next phase of the program, which is, in fact, a panel in which both Arnold and yes, that we are part of. When paying tributes, as Nick said, we should not forget people, the pioneers. And as you were speaking, Nick, I remembered the very first judge that you engaged to take some sort of global work was Justice Paul Steen, now retired from Australia. And I would like to end paying a tribute to him. Of course, at that time, there was no talk of a global judicial institute on the environment, but there was a talk for a need to get the judges together, to train the judges. And as Nick said, this is a long process. And it's a long process that's perhaps just beginning, and we have much more to do. So my final note is this: there is a lot of work ahead of us, and the establishment of the Global Judicial Institute on the environment is an invitation, an open invitation to the judges of the world to work together. So many thanks, and we will now begin with this. Are you chairing, Sheila? No? Unfortunately, our colleague, Chief Justice Mark Reckendahl is not able to be with us. He, as you know, in Hawaii, the islands are facing a major challenge from nature. And Justice Reckendahl really wanted to be here. And I'm asking Justice Wilson to convey to him our gratitude for the great work that he has done, not just for Hawaii, but engage in the U.S. judicial system and embracing the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment. He is someone that represents the very best of the judiciaries in the world. Someone that it's a pity that he's not here, because once he sits in a meeting like this, you can tell immediately that that's someone that has leadership, has knowledge, speaks and behaves like a judge, and at the same time is someone that is wonderful to be with. So please convey to him that we missed him dearly in this meeting. I'm sure he's not connected, so you need to give him the report on what we said. I now pass the microphone to the chair, and it's Professor Nicholas Robb.
Buenos tardes a todos. I shall speak in English, but I want to thank the Organization of American States for the wonderful provision of interpretive services, and I want to thank the interpreters for the extraordinarily fine job that they are doing on Espanol and English. I remember when the Environmental Law Institute was first founded, Fred Anderson published one of its first books, which was called NEPA in the Courts. And this dealt with the creation of the environmental impact statement process in the 1969 adoption of the National Environmental Policy Act in the United States. The role of the courts at that time was an extraordinary time of adventure, and it would be I'd be remiss in not observing that ever since then, the Environmental Law Institute has worked diligently to interpret judicial decisions, provide through the Environmental Law Reporter early copies of judicial decisions at a time in which the reporter systems were not singling out environmental law as a special field. Many people doubted in the 1970s that environmental law was even a field of law. Over those years, the UN system in 1972 held the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm, which called for the creation of the UN Environmental Program. And UNEP has continued and grown, and it needs enormously more resources, but it's prospered in ways which no one could have anticipated. We have created these information systems around the world, and our collaboration in environmental law has grown up at the same time that we have developed the new technologies that enable us to meet in virtual reality anywhere in the world and to share our knowledge instantly around the world. So this meeting is really at a fascinating moment. One of the reasons we're here is that there are over 1,500 new environmental tribunals in more than 50 nations. The judges in these new tribunals, some are very experienced and some have never had their first environmental case. Some think if you put a small penalty on an environmental offense, that will provide adequate deterrence. We need desperately to create the new remedies, to explore the issues of burdens of proof that we discussed today, to evaluate how environmental science should be presented to these tribunals and courts, and how they should be assessed on judicial review and cassation in higher courts. All of these questions have had a rich pattern or corpus of experience, but I wouldn't say we have agreed practices. I think in dubio pro natura, as it's developed especially in South America, is one of the great refinements of the judiciary and jurisprudence. But in other parts of the world, why are you speaking Latin to me? Where does this come from? I don't find it in my Roman dictionaries. So we need to share what it means to have presumptions about the environment at a time in which we are going to see enormous environmental disruption. Now, the role of the courts in every society are absolutely critical for social justice, for establishing order, for resolving disputes peacefully, and for maintaining the stable foundation for a diverse society. That pattern that role of the judiciary becomes even more important when there's a terrible disaster or a social uprising or trouble. Think even of the function, quasi-judicial function of truth and reconciliation courts or tribunals after great disruption. The climate change rapid impact of disruption is going to make the role of the courts ever more important. So this Judicial Institute comes not a minute too soon. We're now out of the Holocene, the great 10,000 years that created us, and we're in this Anthropocene era, epoch, if you will, of geological time, in which we're changing the Earth. And when there's a great disruption, the media follows it. We get lots of reports, like the hurricane now, a very large hurricane, I gather, in Hawaii. But the gradual disruption that leads up to it, the courts don't, or the judiciary, or rather the press, the media, the public education doesn't follow very well. The trends that Tom Lovejoy talked about this morning are not trends that people know about. But the judges need to know about them because it means small decisions are cumulative, just as small actions are cumulative. How do we take the universal obligation of states to do environmental impact statements, which is now acknowledged in statutes in most nations? It's acknowledged as a binding norm of international law by the International Court of Justice in the Uruguay pulp mills case. It is Part 206 of the Law of the Sea Treaty, where we must do environmental impact assessment for any action that affects the oceans. So if we're part of the world of the blue law that was discussed yesterday, we need to have rigorous environmental impact assessment. I have studied EIA since it was first established under the National Environmental Policy Act, and I'm sad to say I don't know of a single nation or state or jurisdiction that does EIA in a completely robust and effective way. We are still children in our societies in how we use environmental impact assessment as a tool to prevent environmental damage. So how do we make our societies responsible for not just the minimum compliance with international norms on the environment, but anticipating what those norms must guide, how those norms must guide our behavior at all levels of governance? Well, these we've now had 2 days of rather rich and insightful discussions. This panel is to sum up, if you will, some ideas, but not so much describing what we've done, but to project what we need to do for the future. How shall we strengthen the judiciary going forward? How can we have remedies that are systemic, that deal with not just the need to, say, fight wildfires where they break out in dry places, but to prevent the conditions that create or permit the wildfires to come into existence. Since they are a social phenomenon, humans are involved in letting them happen or dealing with them, not just a natural phenomenon. How can we deal systematically with the right to water when the hydrologic cycle has changed enormously and the droughts are there? What can we learn from what China or northern part of Central Africa are doing to prevent desertification today? Or learn from what was done in Oklahoma and the Middle West of the United States during the Great Dust Bowl when we had our own desertification in North America? And how can we learn from those lessons to really build the precautionary practice in the Amazon so that we don't reach the tipping point? I was privileged to be in the Amazon at a time in which it had a great drought, in which the Amazon, many rivers, were great beaches on both sides, with a little tiny, if you will, flow of water in the center, in which a judge of the Supreme Court of Brazil, the High Judicial Court, who was from that region, who's of indigenous background, said to me, "My people used to be very strong with their upper torso, rowing their canoes throughout the byways of the Amazon. But now they're very strong with their lower legs and their ability to walk for miles before they get to the water to put in their canoes." That moment that happened was 1 year's drought, and then the water came back. The scientists think perhaps the water went down into the water table, but something stopped the hydrologic cycle for a season with great disruption. It was a precautionary tale. And we could find, and I'm sure each of you can find, a similar tale in the places where you live, because we're all experiencing some of this disruption of some type or another. So I invite the members of this panel, all of you whom you've met already, to be able to share their projections with you about where they see the need for judicial action in the future. How can we strengthen the capacity of jurisprudence to provide us with guidance in our society? How can we build respect for the courts throughout our societies? Because we will need this respect in the coming decades, even more than we ever have in the past, in my estimation. And perhaps I can begin, Sheila Abed, with you. You've come all the way from Paraguay for this meeting. You've shared many of the experiences of the last 2 days in your own legal work, so I give the floor to you.
Well, good afternoon. I was asked by Claudia to speak in Spanish, so please wear your headphones. And before starting, I will say that it was a very long afternoon, day, a wonderful day, learning so many things, and that's why I decided I want to be a little bit provocative in order that we put some flavor to the meeting. Bueno, primero quiero contextualizar mi presentación. Estoy viniendo de 5 años de trabajar en el Poder Ejecutivo en mi país y a partir de esta experiencia, primero fui miembro del gabinete, fui ministra de Justicia y luego tuve la oportunidad de dirigir mi país, el Paraguay, vende su principal fuente de ingresos, es la venta de hidroelectricidad. Y nosotros tenemos unas gigantescas represas, una con el Brasil, que es la que más produce energía hidroeléctrica en el mundo, inclusive más que la de Tres Gargantas de China, y otra con Argentina. Durante estos 5 años estuve trabajando en el Poder Ejecutivo y viendo con preocupación algunos temas que creo que nos van a servir para pensar qué es lo que estamos haciendo y qué es lo que nos falta, y también mirarlo desde el Poder Judicial, que trabajé como asesora del Congreso muchos años, trabajé también en el Poder Ejecutivo y nunca he trabajado en el Poder Judicial, pero sí es algo que me tienta porque creo que realmente, no que me tiente a hacer, pero que me tienta como experiencia cercana, porque realmente creo que de alguna manera el pacto social de un Estado es de alguna manera controlado y vigilado por el Poder Judicial. Pero quería contextualizar mi presentación diciendo primero que solamente esta semana, la semana que pasó, recibimos muchos de nosotros un mensaje de Claudio Maretti. Claudio Maretti es representante del Brasil, estuvo muchos años en el Consejo de la UICN y contaba con preocupación que de cara al proceso eleccionario para presidente en el Brasil se hicieron varios polls o encuestas sobre qué interesaba a la gente para la agenda del futuro presidente del Brasil. Ustedes pueden creer que en los 10 primeros puntos no figuraba el tema ambiente. En los 10 primeros puntos de lo que es el top de los intereses de la gente en Brasil, un país que tiene más de 200 millones de personas y de donde viene nuestro gran amigo Antonio. Aparte de eso, toda esa preocupación sobre por qué este tema está bajando en la opinión pública fue objeto de una investigación por parte de varias ya escuelas, de universidades, que se dan cuenta de algo. Nuestro mensaje a veces es preocupante. ¿Qué sucede? Estamos en un momento de la historia en que todo pasa aquí y ahora. Estamos aquí, pero también sabemos lo que está pasando en Hawái. También sé, me molestaron toda la mañana, lo que está pasando en Paraguay. También sabemos lo que está pasando y la gente quiere algo pronto, una solución pronta, importante, magnífica, sobresaliente, inmediata. Entonces vivimos también en un mundo altamente mediático. ¿Y cuál es nuestra, de alguna manera, ahora hablo como ambientalista, me estoy abstrayendo un poco de ir directamente a lo judicial? ¿Cuál es nuestra agenda? Bueno, en el mejor de los escenarios, y si hacemos todo bien, el cambio climático vamos a poder empezar a ver algún tipo de mejora en unos 15 o 20 años. Entonces la gente dice, no, me preocupo por hoy y ahora. ¿Qué es lo que quiero entonces? Vivir los 15 años que me sobran, refiriéndome a algunas necesidades que van a mejorar lo que creo que es mi calidad de vida hoy. En todas las Américas, los derechos civiles están levantando la presión. ¿Qué es lo que estamos buscando en todas partes? Importantísimo, claro, las discusiones sobre derechos civiles, el aborto legal o no, el matrimonio igualitario, el acceso a la información para poder tener un gobierno más participativo. Entonces, un poco la preocupación viene que estamos haciendo mal o por qué estamos haciendo algo que nos está llevando en una carrera en la cual estamos perdiendo puntos. Una de las cuestiones importantes es que los estados presentan un alto grado de fragmentación entre sus tres poderes. Los tres poderes del Estado no se comunican. Desde luego que habrá escenarios muy buenos en los cuales esto no está pasando, pero en muchos escenarios sí está pasando. ¿Y qué pasa? El Poder Ejecutivo responde inmediatamente a lo mediático. Sucede algo y el Poder Ejecutivo en su trabajo de gestión diaria tiene que salir y responder inmediatamente. No puede dejar de responder inmediatamente. El legislativo también responde inmediatamente, es su constituency, y no le van a votar si es que no hace de alguna manera la respuesta. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que sucede? El último relicto que puede pensar un poco más lejos es el Poder Judicial. un poco más lejos, porque también existe hoy una enorme cantidad de jueces que son muy mediáticos también. O sea, esto no es algo de lo cual también podemos decir que no existe en el Poder Judicial. Pero sí el Poder Judicial es el único que quizás puede decir, bueno, me separo un poco y miro para ver con perspectiva cuáles son los pasos que tengo que tomar. ¿Y qué sucede con este estado de fragmentación? A mí me gustan mucho dos profesores. Uno es Jeremy Waldron, que ahora está en NYU, y él habla mucho sobre lo importante de la articulación gubernamental, ¿verdad? Y cómo al perderse esa articulación gubernamental, tenemos menor calidad de gobierno, ¿verdad? Pero no es algo a lo que la gente está acostumbrada a pensar todo el día. Joseph Raz también, originalmente de la Universidad Hebrea de Jerusalén, ahora no sé dónde está, da clases en varios sitios, habla, no son ambientalistas y por eso los traigo a colación, no son profesores que escriben sobre ambiente, pero él dice, bueno, ¿cómo responder a las demandas sociales sin perder la perspectiva? Esa perspectiva que yo les decía de más largo plazo. Bueno, esto tiene que obligatoriamente llevar a un trabajo coordinado. ¿Y cuál es el trabajo coordinado al que aspiramos? Bueno, básicamente es muy importante. 3 indicadores claves son la capacidad del legislativo de crear normas jurídicas adecuadas que puedan guiar el trabajo del Ejecutivo y el Judicial. Todo el tiempo nos encontramos con enormes vacíos. La habilidad del Ejecutivo de implementar acciones que estén bien fundadas en las normas. Y por último, la correcta interpretación en el ámbito judicial, creando una jurisprudencia consistente, coherente. ¿Cómo ve la gente en líneas generales? Y este es también un trabajo que he hecho y hemos hecho con otros colegas sobre la gobernanza ambiental. La ve inefectiva, la ve arbitraria, la ve subjetiva y la ve impredecible. Esas no son 4 cualidades con las cuales queremos que se reconozca a la gobernanza ambiental. Entonces, y claramente no estoy hablando de aquellos que están en la punta, los países que están más desarrollados, que tienen mayor coherencia, claridad, eficiencia. Estoy hablando de la masa de países que también, tenemos que reconocer, muchas veces tienen la mayor cantidad de biodiversidad, muchas veces también ha cambiado aquello de que el aporte a los problemas de cambio climático solamente están en el norte, ustedes saben muy bien, hoy en día eso se distribuye de otra manera. Entonces, ¿cuáles son 4 debilidades que personalmente vi como ejecutora, como miembro de un gabinete en donde tenía que recibir una orden, un fallo y cumplir esa ejecución de sentencia? Bueno, básicamente una de ellas es certidumbre y coherencia. ¿Qué significa? Establecer de la mejor manera posible cuáles son las normas jurídicas aplicables, fundamentando esto con la mayor precisión, identificando posibles conflictos entre normas, ¿verdad? Me ha tocado ver, y acá ya me parece que me falta muy poco, me ha tocado ver fallos que se refieren a normas derogadas. Eso es algo increíble, ¿verdad? Entonces, también la jerarquía de normas, muchas veces olvidamos, y ni qué decir, hay cuestiones claramente inconstitucionales, pero también hay cuestiones en las cuales se olvida casi siempre el derecho ambiental internacional. Eso es algo que veo consistentemente. Los jueces olvidan, no tienen en cuenta a la hora de sus fallos los compromisos internacionales asumidos por el país, y eso tiene mucho que ver con la fragmentación del gobierno al que había hecho mención. Luego también muchas veces encontramos decisiones judiciales referidas vagamente, con poco anclaje, que más bien parecen algo así como crean una preocupante confusión en la ejecución de las sentencias. A veces son rebuscadas, son inaplicables decisiones, porque la gente en líneas generales, y por eso yo hago hincapié en algo que creo que este instituto puede crear muy bien, es, aparte del positivismo de inculcar a los jueces todo lo que hay en el derecho positivo, enseñarles el razonamiento jurídico ambiental. El razonamiento jurídico ambiental que tiene que ser el que está por detrás de ese derecho positivo que tenemos que utilizar. Porque muchas veces nos encontramos con este tipo de fallos que se apartan de la interpretación convencional, lo cual a veces es bueno, pero muchas veces recae en algo que es de casi imposible cumplimiento. El lenguaje de las decisiones es importante, porque muchas veces vemos que se pierde la oportunidad de proveer una clara dirección al Ejecutivo, con fallos que más parecen recomendaciones o sugerencias. En otros casos también existe la preocupación de llenar los vacíos legales. Se llenan los vacíos legales y muchas veces esto puede ser visto como un activismo judicial que a veces molesta inclusive a los otros poderes del Estado. Y ahí les recuerdo, cuando hablamos de los frecuentes vacíos legales, que en muchos de nuestros países, ayer escuchaba algunas de las presentaciones, existe iniciativa parlamentaria judicial en casi todos nuestros países. ¿Y qué significa? Que podemos mejorar el acceso a la justicia, podemos mejorar los institutos de justicia si necesitamos amoldarlos a lo que es el razonamiento jurídico ambiental a través de la propia iniciativa del Poder Judicial, que utiliza muy poco esta prerrogativa. Y casi por último, lo que también veo bastante son fallos no sistemáticos que no ayudan a crear una jurisprudencia coherente. Me gusta cómo le llaman en inglés, meal pieces. Algunos de estos fallos son como meal pieces. Time is up. Bueno, entonces esto hace que no haya una aplicación consistente que otorgue peso a las decisiones a través del tiempo y que aporta claramente falta de predecibilidad. Podría decir para concluir que el rigor técnico y científico que el Poder Judicial puede aportar al tema ambiental quizás sirva como elemento aglutinador para esa fragmentación que hablé en lo que tiene que ver a los estados como tal y que se origina en la misma base de la propia organización que tenemos en nuestros estados. Y creo que el derecho ambiental y sus desafíos, que son gigantes, son una magnífica oportunidad para mejorar esto. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Sheila. I'm sorry to have to push you in the time, but the time police is sitting next to me, and now I get to keep control of the time police. So it's quite an honor to give the floor now to Claudia de Wint.
Vincent, la verdad es que es un gran privilegio compartir este panel con tan distinguidos colegas y socios claves de la Organización de Estados Americanos. Se nos ha pedido platicar un poco esta tarde y sobre el papel de los jueces, del Poder Judicial en el avance de ese concepto del Estado de Derecho Ambiental que hemos venido trabajando desde Río +20. Antes de contarles sobre 3 puntos que quisiera hacer en mi presentación esta tarde, decirles que lo que les voy a contar es una mirada, como se dice en inglés, from a 10-foot view, a 10 pies de distancia, sobre lo que ha sido mi modesta y humilde experiencia trabajando con jueces de esta región específicamente y con muchos de ustedes, por supuesto, que han sido durante todos estos años unos maestros para mí. Entonces, el primer punto que quisiera referirme es sobre el carácter precautorio del derecho ambiental, que fue algo que mencioné ayer. No se trata de un derecho de daños. Is there a problem with the interpretation? Oh, okay. Perfecto. Como les decía, no se trata de un derecho de daños. Los jueces han dejado de ser esa última frontera y han pasado a ser como una suerte de primera línea de defensa. Y además de resolver la conflictividad puntual sobre algún asunto ambiental, las sentencias tienen un papel educativo. En este momento de cambio global son un instrumento que le permite a los jueces también ser agentes de cambio de la conducta de la sociedad que queremos y que tanto necesitamos mudar ante las nuevas amenazas que enfrentamos en el día de hoy. Por otro lado, el tema de cerrar la brecha entre lo que es la ley y lo que es la implementación. Esa implementación debe ser progresiva y como bien nos decía Sheila, debe avanzar sobre las fuentes del derecho internacional, como son los tratados, como es la jurisprudencia que ya existe, la doctrina y los principios, tomando elementos de las distintas ramas del derecho, como por ejemplo los derechos humanos. Hemos hablado mucho del principio pro persona, de la progresividad que se requiere en las cuestiones ambientales, pero también prevenir la evolución del riesgo o del daño ambiental, manejando un sinnúmero de incertidumbres para cuyo abordaje ese principio precautorio es clave. Y esto los jueces, ¿cómo lo hacen? Bueno, a través de distintas herramientas. Por ejemplo, el ministro Gutiérrez nos hablaba esta mañana de las medidas cautelares, que son básicas en la prevención del daño. Después que ya tenemos un impacto, tenemos que prevenir ese daño, pero también tener en cuenta que así como el medio ambiente cambia, el daño continúa evolucionando. Entonces son cuestiones que el juez tiene que tomar en cuenta. Otras herramientas pueden ser los peritajes, las intervenciones de terceros. Las cortes internacionales, por ejemplo, tienen instrumentos como las opiniones consultivas. En estos 2 días hemos hablado mucho de la opinión consultiva 23 de la Corte Interamericana. Entonces, los jueces, ¿qué están haciendo? Reaccionando ante el riesgo, ante la incertidumbre, esas nuevas amenazas de este siglo, de esta era del antropoceno que nos mencionaba el profesor Robinson, que por supuesto incluyen la degradación ambiental y el impacto del cambio climático. Otra cuestión importante es que basarse en la ciencia es fundamental, pero aunque hay una máxima jurídica que dice que el juez es el perito de los peritos, las sentencias de por sí carecen de la certeza de la ciencia. Entonces, el derecho no debe ser aplicado como si fuese una ciencia en que la consecuencia es atribuible a un supuesto o a una hipótesis, ya que existen esos riesgos y esas incertidumbres y esa posibilidad de que el daño evolucione. Entonces, tendríamos que hablar de una aplicación judicial del derecho más bien como un arte. Y aquí me gustaría citar a un autor del siglo pasado, Ángel Osorio, que escribió un libro que me gusta mucho, que se llama El alma de la toga. Si no lo han leído, les recomiendo que lo hagan. Osorio nos dice que el derecho no establece la realidad, sino que más bien la sirve. Camina mansamente tras ella, tratando de alcanzar sus pasos. Entonces, el juez debe tratar de buscar lo que es un balance entre los distintos intereses que se dan en estas cuestiones ambientales, y ese balance también debe ser intergeneracional, pero también intrageneracional, porque tenemos diferencias entre distintos grupos que están a un mismo nivel, inclusive, o grupos que estén en diferentes niveles de manera vertical. Entonces, las decisiones no deben y no ocurren en abstracto, aunque estas estén ajustadas a la ley. Todos sabemos que es imposible la tarea del legislador de diseñar una ley que pueda satisfacer las necesidades de todos los contextos que tenemos entre países y dentro de un mismo país. Entonces, aún la ley es o se considera erga omnes, hay un sinnúmero de variables a las que esta no necesariamente se adapta, y aquí entra el papel del juez en la interpretación de la ley. El juez Reiber nos hablaba ayer de la confianza pública. Yo quisiera y no les voy a preguntar, pero me imagino, y yo he estudiado un poco este tema en los Estados miembros de la región, que todos los jueces toman un juramento, ¿verdad? Entonces, ese juramento lo que nos da es una doble garantía, que es una garantía de independencia, primero para el propio juez, ¿verdad? Y después para la sociedad y la sociedad en general a la que ustedes como jueces sirven. Entonces, en este sentido, yo creo que es fundamental acercarse a la gente, conocer la realidad y alejarnos de esa noción de los poderes judiciales que están dentro de cuatro paredes tomando decisiones aislados del contexto y de la realidad. Entonces, la labor de interpretación y de aplicación judicial y del derecho se convierte primero en un diálogo constitucional, en un diálogo entre la justicia y la sociedad sobre el derecho y cómo éste debe servir, como les mencionaba antes, a las necesidades y al contexto que tenemos en la sociedad. Y yo quiero decir aquí que la especialización es importante, porque como un juez que no conoce los temas y que no maneja las cuestiones ambientales puede ser independiente, si depende del todo de un tercero que le auxilie en esa labor. Y esto que les comento de que las decisiones no ocurren en abstracto y que veo una creciente necesidad de tomar en cuenta el contexto y la realidad local, no me estoy refiriendo a un activismo judicial, sino me refiero a lo que muy elocuentemente nos mencionaba ayer el juez Wilson, a que el tratamiento debe ser el mismo cuando nos estamos refiriendo a no discriminar con relación a raza, género, condición o estrato social. Debe ser el mismo tratamiento cuando nos referimos a eso que cuando nos referimos a las cuestiones ambientales o climáticas. Debe haber una distribución equitativa de las cargas y los beneficios ambientales. Entonces, basados en ese juramento que todos ustedes han tomado, los jueces aplican la ley basados en una fidelidad activa a la Constitución, y en esta región tenemos 24 constituciones que establecen el derecho a un medio ambiente sano y equilibrado, con conocimiento de los hechos, con conocimiento de la ciencia, con especialización, para poder manejar todas esas incertidumbres y esos riesgos a los que me he referido, pero también las consecuencias que las decisiones pueden tener, y no solamente para estas generaciones, sino para las que nos siguen. Esto es lo que verdaderamente va a permitir satisfacer esa necesidad de doble garantía. El juez independiente que pueda entregar y garantizar a la gente justicia y legalidad, que son dos temas distintos. Entonces aquí entra un elemento moral y ético. En ese balance de intereses y en ese balance de cuestiones hablamos de lo que es legal por un lado, pero por otro lado de lo que es legítimo y de lo que es justo, que es muy diferente a lo que sería un activismo judicial. Entonces yo pienso que el Estado de Derecho Ambiental, y es un poco lo que, como les digo, esto es el resultado de un aprendizaje, de un trabajo con todos ustedes que agradezco muchísimo, que son elementos que incluyen todo lo que es legislación efectiva, aplicable, transparente, participación del público, derechos humanos, todas las fuentes del derecho, y traer de las distintas ramas los elementos de ese Estado de Derecho se operativizan y logran su cometido cuando tenemos presencia de esos elementos que les he comentado esta tarde. Entonces yo quisiera terminar mi presentación con esto, agradeciendo nuevamente a todos por su atención.
Well, thank you very much. I will stand because it's my siesta time in Brazil. And I want to make sure that in case I doze off, it's visible, I will collapse. Well, first of all, many thanks for the invitation, Claudia, and all the organizers. I will have a chance at the very end to thank all the organizers. But for the moment, especially Claudia de Wind, our host here today. This is a very interesting panel because we could spend the whole day and perhaps have a whole conference just on this topic, the role of the judiciary in advancing the environmental rule of law. We could in fact have 3 conferences out of this topic. We could have one on the role of the judiciary in environmental law in general. Second, on advancing environmental law. And third, just on the environmental rule of law. All those 3 are combined in this panel that I have the privilege to join. So let's begin with the role of the judiciary. The first question is, still in many parts of the world, let's not forget that. Do judges have a role to play in protecting the environment? We should not take for granted that in every single country of the world, judges, one, understand the importance of the judiciaries in protecting the environment, and second, judges do protect the environment, basically applying the legislation that is in place. One of the things that I learned very quickly when I began working with comparative environmental law is that over half of the countries in the world do not have a single precedent at the Supreme Court addressing the environment as such. They might have a precedent on water, another precedent on wildlife, a precedent on nuisance, on waste disposal, contamination, but not on the environment per se. Even more surprising is that there are countries that do have an independent judiciary, do have good environmental laws, and in every conference where we meet, the same precedents are cited. From 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and that's it. 2 questions. Have environmental problems disappeared? Or second, probably that's the question that should be asked, have those problems not arrived at the judiciary? And where are they? So, this is the first challenge that this title gives us to discuss the role of the judiciary in protecting the environment. Somehow, there are people that think that judges, in order to protect the environment, they have to invent environmental law, to be activists, to forget what the legislation that is in front of them and come up with solutions that are not in the legal books. This is a misconception. In most countries in the world, in all continents, the activism is not with the judges, but with the legislation. So in fact, the activist judges will be the ones that continue to apply the old legal paradigms that have been changed, reformed, replaced. And those are activist judges that are very difficult to identify their sins, because they are repeating something that doesn't exist anymore, but it did exist, the jurisprudence of the past, unable to overcome that jurisprudence, not because she or he wants, but because the law changed. That's what I call the activist judge by omission, and sometimes by submission to old paradigms that don't exist anymore. Let's move now to the second core, so to speak, of this title. In advancing the environmental rule of law, is it the task of judges to advance anything, or just to apply the law? What do we mean by advancing? Well, one possibility is to say to advance is to apply the legislation that is there. Another possibility is still within the boundaries of what we do daily, is instead of applying pieces of this legislation, we identify the spirit, the principles of that piece of legislation, and even more difficult, but more profound and more correct, to identify the principles of the whole legal system, to integrate the legal system. And that's a task that we judges are called upon all the time in doing or dealing with environmental cases. Although we are challenged to apply a specific legal provision in a regulation lost in the periphery of the legal system, the judge is in fact being called to apply the whole legal system in a holistic manner and in an environmental manner. So advancing can be or can mean what I have just described. Advancing in bringing the pieces together and then delivering the just, hopefully, the just response that is requested by the parties. But advance can also mean to see in the legislation not the old pillars that the legislation used as a platform for its life, but seeing those pillars as they change. And this country is a master in doing this. And judges that do this every day and change the meaning of the Constitution say that they don't do it. "90% of criminal procedure in this country is the result of this exercise. Looking at the Constitution draft in an era completely different from this, and then, well, this is in this provision, this is in that provision. And we are the ones, the outsiders, looking at this. My goodness, this is incredible that it was done by judges that say that we should look at original intent. So finally, the environmental rule of law. I have 3 minutes. So the environmental rule of law, the third nucleus of this topic. And here I'd like to stress just a couple of aspects, because we could have this discussion as we have been having for many years in more depth and detail. The first one is a misconception that of many people, I would say the majority of the members of our environmental law family, that see environmental law and the environmental rule of law as a system of only rights. It's not a system of only rights. It's a system of obligations, new obligations, and we should be very proud of that. For example, the ecological function of property rights. It guarantees a right and at the same time attach obligations. Second, as opposed to the traditional rule of law, the environmental rule of law is not just looking at the present, it's prospective. And not prospective because we cannot realize it today, but prospective because some of the subjects are not here today, but they will come, hopefully, in the future. And finally, because, and I'll stop here, because it's the rule of law, but it's also the rule of judges. Not meaning that judges will make the laws, but meaning that the judges are governed themselves by the laws. Especially laws in respect to integrity, independence, ethics, and all those foundations that make our profession the beautiful profession that we all agree it is. In conclusion, we are judges that were trained to look at the past and at the present. And now we are asked by the people, by the legislators, to look to the future. Not forgetting the past, not forgetting the present. The difficulty here is that we are asked to look at the far distant future. And this is something that will require a lot of learning. Thank you.
Multi obrigado. Thank you so much, Antonio, and now I pass the floor to Arnold.
Thank you very much, Professor Robinson. What an event it has been. We have discussed a number of extremely important issues. If you look at the agenda we have set ourselves for these 2 days, we've tackled climate change, we've discussed trends and principles of environmental rule of law, we've heard great and very inspirational keynotes. We looked at water in the context of justice and environmental rule of law. And here we are discussing now where we are going from here. Why do we need environmental rule of law? I think it's very important to break this down. And a figure I think that allows us to do that is the number 207. That is the number of environmental defenders killed last year. It's the highest number ever, and it points towards a trend that people who stand up for their environmental rights worldwide are under increasing threat. They are threatened with losing their livelihoods, they are harassed, they are attacked, and unfortunately, they are also being killed. 207 alone last year. That is why UN Environment has decided to launch an environmental rights initiative. And we are very honored and very proud that next week, not a week after next, on the 3rd of September, we will launch this initiative at the Museum of Tomorrow at Rio de Janeiro for the Latin American, the Caribbean region. And as Justice Benjamin has rightly said, even though this is about environmental rights, it's important to combine that with environmental duties and obligations. One cannot exist without the other. But it seems, to me at least, that the fact that environmental rights seem, on the one hand, to be on the rise, but on the other hand, those people standing up for these rights are suffering, that indicates that we need to shine a better light on environmental rights, and we need to ensure that these rights deliver results for people and the planet. And judges have an important role to play in this. This cannot be done without you judges. RIA Principle 10 is perhaps the principle within the RIA Declaration that describes your role within all of this the best. It's about public participation, access to information, and access to justice. It's perhaps the principle of the RIA Declaration that also best describes what good environmental governance means and why it's so important. If people around the world do not have access to environmental information, they do not know, as I also said yesterday, what quality the water they drink has, what quality the air they breathe has, and whether or not in their backyard there is a industrial facility being built that might damage their health and the health of their children and grandchildren in the long run. The second aspect is a very democratic aspect of Principle 10. It's the right to be involved in the decision making, based on the belief that if those who are affected by a certain decision are involved in the decision making, ultimately these decisions will be better. The third aspect is a realization that despite having access to information and being allowed to participate in the decision making, the outcome can still be imperfect. And there will be instances when violations of environmental rights occur or when harm occurs. And in these circumstances, it's important that there exists the access to justice, the ability to pursue potential remedies through a judicial system. And that's where the judges come in. Can judges do it alone? No, they cannot do it alone. That's why environmental rule of law also implies that there is a good body of adequate legislation in place. If the law is not adequate, then the best judge in the world, I think, cannot help and cannot remedy the situation. So we need good and adequate legislation. We need also strong institutions. We're living in a time now where institutions are under attack all over the world. And I think especially you judges and the judiciary have a role to play in upholding the importance of these institutions that humanity has fought so hard for. And we cannot simply disregard the very important role that institutions play. So institutions are also a very important part of environmental rule of law. And this includes, of course, civil society. I think that's the beautiful aspect also of environmental rule of law, that in its best form, it's very encompassing. The Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that our world leaders have adopted in 2015 sets itself as a goal to leave nobody behind. And I think environmental rule of law, if applied, can help us doing that. But if we don't have environmental rule of law, then we will also not be able to curb environmental crime, now the fourth largest form of organized crime around the world. Environmental litigation. For that to function, for that to have effects, for that to be done in an orderly sort of fashion, we need environmental rule of law. We have seen that climate change litigation is on the rise worldwide, and I have also told you already yesterday that it is my personal view, at least, that we will see much more environmental litigation going forward. The fact that information is so readily accessible now all over the world allows people to be increasingly aware of environmental situations, but also of their rights and their ability to pursue these rights. So it's important that judges and courts and tribunals are equipped to deal with this potential rise in litigation. I'm not saying that we are already in an environmental rights movement, but perhaps that's something that we need to contemplate going forward if we look at where does environmental rule of law go. Many of the greatest advancements that humanity has achieved have been based on rights movements, whether it's through the French Revolution, the American Revolution, civil rights movements, political rights movements, worker rights movements, equality rights movements. Maybe the environmental rights movement is next. But what is clear, I think, is that people are increasingly aware of their environmental rights on the one hand, but also have a sense of what is fair and what is unfair in the way environmental pressures and burdens are distributed. And judges will have a role to play in adjudicating over this fairness or unfairness going forward. That's the why. And I think over these 2 days we have clearly established that the why is beyond doubt. How do we now go about this going forward? And as Justice Benjamin has said, it's not a question of activism. And I think that's very important to state. We're not advocating for something radical, but we're advocating for simple application of environmental law. And we still see that too many excellent environmental laws around the world are not effectively applied. And again, the judiciary, I think, has a role to play in this. And through this peer exercise that we've had over these past 2 days, I think you will carry this message forward and also apply this in your discussions with your peers. But what we need, I think, is an ability to deal with new requirements that environmental rule of law brings with it. And again, Justice Benjamin has hinted at those. Environmental rule of law is nothing else than the rule of law applied in the field of the environment. But there are perhaps two aspects that make it special. One is the consideration of future generations, and the other is the consideration of scientific uncertainty. That's perhaps new. And we've also discussed the role of science in judicial decision-making over these past 2 days. But these aspects are very important. Now, UN Environment is very proud to assist you in implementing this how. We are ready to play our little part through the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, through the portal that we've seen the mock-up of, through our capacity building efforts, through a global environmental rule of law report that we're producing together with the Environmental Law Institute, and which will come out later in the year, and which we'll hope provides more context to this concept of environmental rule of law, and more approaches, lessons learned from different parts of the world already, and also trends, where is environmental rule of law going. But we cannot do this, of course, without our good and trusted partners, the World Commission on Environmental Law, IUCN as a whole, the Organization of American States, the Environmental Law Institute, and many, many others. We can only do a small part, but we hope the part that we're able to do going forward will help in equipping the judiciary to deal effectively with these new requirements that are brought upon by the judiciary simply having to deal with environmental issues and making sense of environmental rule of law. Thank you very much.
I thank this panel enormously for insightful and provocative and I think very useful observations about the path ahead, the issues we face. And it's my privilege now for the closing to turn it over to Claudia de Wint and Antonio Benjamin. We will stay here just as window dressing for their remarks.
Thank you very much, Professor Robinson. I think I'm going to leave the difficult job of closing these amazing 2 days to Justice Benjamin, because nobody other than him can do the productive discussions that we've had these 2 days more justice. So I would like, before giving him the floor though, I would like to really give a special thanks to the organizing committee, because you have all thanked me and recognized me today and yesterday, but I am really just a face going around the room and the face that you see. But a lot of people have worked for the success of this event behind the scenes. So to UN Environment, to the World Commission, Justice Benjamin, and Dean Antolini, and in ELI to Scott Fulton, Jay Pendergrass, even though he doesn't want to be called Jay anymore, and Alejandra Rabasa. It has been really and truly a collective and team effort. Without the combination of all of us working together, this would have not been possible. I also would like to thank others that have worked for this event that are also behind the scenes. Lucy Brown in the back of the room, who has, sorry, Lucy, well, now she's here in the front, who's clerking for Justice Wilson in Hawaii. She's only been working for 2 weeks there, so she landed in this meeting and has done an amazing job as well. So thank you, Lucy, on behalf of all of us. And I also want to thank the Department of Conference Services of the Organization of American States, Mr. Luis Coimbra. Luis, muito obrigado. He has been extremely patient with us and has tried to meet every need. And this is not only Luis, this is the whole team that is here, Joyce, Stephen. I'm not going to say everybody's name. I ask your forgiveness for any omission. And the team of the Department of Press and Communications, its director, Gonzalo Esparis, Mr. Morgan Neal, and here we have Karen, Juan Manuel. The whole world has been seeing us the past 2 days because of Ernesto Kosich, because of all the work that they have been doing. Luis Valle, who has become green nowadays, who has also been working with the cameras back there, or interpreters that have allowed us to communicate. And last but not least, I would like to thank a person that's in the back of the room, and I would like him to stand up to be recognized by all of us, Mr. Elliot Sukari. For the past year and a half, Elliot has been my right hand. He has become an environmental lawyer in practice, and this is his last event with us. He's going to Argentina to work with the Minister of Environment on international affairs. So, Elliot, I want to wish you the best of luck in this new stage, and I really want to tell you that I am going to miss you, the organization is going to miss you, the judges are going to miss you, and the environmental law community. In this short time, what you have learned and put into practice and achieved has been really, really incredible. So thank you very much. And with that note of thanks, and please an applause for Elliot. I give the floor to somebody that I admire, that has been a mentor, not only for me, but for many lawyers in the world, and to whom I also want to say that we are really proud to have you as a judge of our hemisphere, a true judge of the Americas. So thank you very much, Justice Benjamin, for all that you do.
As Arnold said this morning about water, now I borrowed the term and applied to the whole program. This has really been an incredible journey. If you look at the program, you are going to notice that we covered a lot. First, we discussed in quite some depth 2 themes that are crucial to environmental law as we see it nowadays. One, the all-encompassing concept of the environmental rule of law. And now we speak it as if it were a fact of nature, forgetting that just in 2012, we were debating and trying to convince colleagues that didn't want this to be used, this concept to be used by us, because they couldn't see the importance or the meaning of the environmental rule of law. And nowadays, we are all, let's say, under the tent of the environmental rule of law concept. And this is something that environmental law missed. We didn't realize that it missed. Now, can you imagine a better concept to bring all the tribes, the cantons, so to speak, of environmental law under one single umbrella? That's the concept of the environmental rule of law. The second general theme that we discussed, and it's absolutely fundamental to environmental law, but in the past, when Nick was a student and already challenging the tenets of law at that time, and I'm not inventing because I mentioned to him that I discovered the minutes of a conference that he participated as a student. It's in the law review. He asking questions, of course, uncomfortable questions to the speakers at that time. So at that time, environmental law was supposed to be just a study of some common law traditions that were having a facelift, so to speak, like nuisance, torts, and so on, and new legislations that people really didn't know what they were all about. One of the very first manuals of environmental law, Professor Hunter definitely knows about it, in the United States has a chapter on tobacco, on smoking. So this shows how much, and I will use Arnold's sentence, we have come a long way. So environmental law at that time didn't include the second broad theme that we discussed today, the role of judges. It was almost as if environmental law were a new legal discipline that would go into the hearts, the homes, the business, and everybody would celebrate in the Brazilian carnival and the goals would be achieved. There would be no need for judges, and especially judges that had a particular expertise on this legal discipline. You could be an administrative judge, and that would allow you to perform well in the application of environmental law, or a civil law judge, or a criminal law judge. We also covered two interrelated, substantive themes that define environmental law nowadays. We missed two others, but that's for the next conference. We covered climate change because at the substantive level, that's the umbrella. Like the environmental rule of law is on the theoretical side of environmental law, and we covered fresh water with the expertise of the judges that are here and also the law professors, the practitioners that helped us in this journey. Finally, we didn't include two other main themes that define environmental law and the challenge that we face in environmental law nowadays. First, the biodiversity crisis, and second, the oceans. We did have Sylvia here, but it was like a cherry on the top, a wonderful cherry. But we all agree that the oceans are very challenging for many, many aspects. And Professor Antolini and the other experts in this room and the colleagues from IUCN, WCL, my colleague Nilufer Oral, and others would agree that the oceans are still a forgotten piece of environmental law. So, in a nutshell, that's the journey that we cover. Now, the words of gratitude. And we begin with the organizations that put together those two events. The Organization of American States, Claudia de Wind, and the whole team of this important institution, all the way to my dear friend, Secretary General Luis Almagro, who is a monument that we need to celebrate every single moment. We never had a Secretary General of this organization with such an engagement as a true believer, not just on the rule of law, but on the environmental rule of law, and we are very grateful to that. To the World Commission on Environmental Law and IUCN, I'm looking at Professor Denise Antolini and the other colleagues that helped and directly in this fantastic team making it possible. My colleagues from the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, and not just the ones that are members of the governing committee, but those that are founding members and are active members of this emerging organization. UN Environment, Arnold and his team in Nairobi, but also in Geneva, Elizabeth Mirema, Eva Doer in Geneva. So it's really a global team. And the Environmental Law Institute. I see Jay Pendergrass still here. Scott Fulton has had some other duties, family duties, and we would like to thank you too for the very important work that you have done. Let me tell you how this whole thing began. My dear friend and colleague, brother, Michael Wilson, approached me and said, look, the judges, the Chief Justice of the United States are meeting in Rhode Island. Could you go to Rhode Island and give a talk to those judges? I said, yes, I could, but couldn't we benefit from the presence of those Chief Justices? What do you think? And organize something bigger. Well, Mike immediately took that into his hand. He spoke with his Chief Justice that I already celebrated here, my friend Mark Rechtenwald. I always have difficulty pronouncing his last name, and I'm always mispronouncing his last name. And Mark and Mike became the ambassadors. And they approach the other Chief Justice, and the result is what we have here. So, Mike, to you, and to mark our gratitude for being those two great ambassadors to the judiciary in the United States. I was telling the Chief Justice of Vermont this morning that what Americans don't realize is that for law, they are the Romans of modern times. And this is incredible, because this country always said, look, we are common law. It's not common law at all. We are part of the common law world, but almost every tenet of environmental law was invented in this country and used by US judges. So I guess at the very end, we should pay a tribute to the leadership of the law professors, the agencies, the state, but the judges of the United States that made environmental law a reality, and more than a reality, a necessity for the whole world. So the example that this country gave to the world is one that will not disappear, because it's already entrenched all over in constitutions, in national environmental policy acts. Even the terminology is the same. Environmental impact assessment. We were forced to invent legal terms in our countries that didn't exist because of the pioneer work of the United States. There is no term in Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, and French for enforcement, for compliance, accountability. So at the very end, I think it's very fair that we pay a tribute to the people of the United States that are the ones at the end of the day responsible for environmental law as we see it around the world. So I guess it's time to end, and I always end thanking the interpreters. Without language, I tell my two nephews that are, one's law student, the other one is just graduated. Without language, law would not exist. There are many professions, important professions, that don't need language. But our tool is language. And how could we communicate in a comparative exercise as we are doing here if it were not the absolutely necessary work of the interpreters? An interpretation of law, it's much more difficult than other technical disciplines, because it involves concepts that don't translate very well from one system into the other. So on that note, I would like to thank the interpreter, and in thanking them, thanking all the participants that are here, came from different countries. Some of them flew from the other side of the world, our Chinese colleagues from Africa, Europe, Latin America. We had 2 great days, and the good news is that I'm sure Claudia is already thinking about the next event of this type. So many thanks to everyone, and congratulations to all the organizers. Arnold conveyed a message to Nairobi, to Geneva, and I will convey, and Denise, we were going to convey to our colleagues from our organizations. Thank you very much, and I think that's the end for the moment.